Whereas a lot of people see religion and history, it's sort of looking back. But if you can put it into a new context, people can see that it can be brought to life now and be relevant to people now.
Faith at the Fringe, a Sanctuary First podcast series. Uncovering God in the creative arts. At the biggest international arts festival in the world, Sanctuary First stops to ask, where does faith and art meet?
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 6 of Faith at the Fringe podcast for 2024. We have another brand new episode for you this evening with brand new co-host and a brand new guest. And equally, I am super excited about this evening's podcast because we're exploring something a little bit different than we have before. So you will notice our friend alongside me. Here is Duncan Cullens. Hi, Duncan.
Great to be here. Hi, Ruth. How are you?
Doing great. I'm so happy you're with us because we're on a music theme this evening. So Duncan, if you don't know who Duncan is a friend of Sanctuary First. He's a composer and also the associate pastor at Cornton Baptist Church in Stirling. But we know you well on Sanctuary First, so we're just so happy to hear you speaking today.
Yeah, I'm just always glad to get invited back. It's always nice. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And also with us this evening, our guest that we're going to be chatting with is Tim Hunter. Now, Tim is a singer-songwriter and he is bringing his show, The Northern Faith, to here at the Fringe. Great to have you with us, Tim.
Thank you for inviting me.
And you may well pick up there that Tim's accent is not a local accent, is it?
No, North Yorkshire.
North Yorkshire, so not too far away.
No, not really, no.
No, and is this the first time that you're here at the Fringe?
No, it's the third time, actually. I did a show about Captain James Cook. I've been doing shows about history, historical characters from Yorkshire. Then last year I did William Wilberforce. And then this year I thought I'd change it. I thought I'd go back, not a few hundred years, but to the first millennium, when actually Yorkshire and Edinburgh were part of the same, the kingdom of Northumbria.
So that's a long time ago, isn't it?
Going back a lot further now, yeah.
It is. So Northern Faith is a musical performance that you've brought up, and you have this wonderful way of telling history, church history, not just Scottish history, but that history through song. And it's really, I've been listening to some of your pieces and they're really quite unusual and wonderful and provoke, they really provoke thought and contemplation. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Northern Faith show that you've brought here to the Fringe?
Yes, well, it's, as I say, about the, after the collapse of the Roman rule, basically, there was a bit of a power vacuum and a lot of warring kind of factions fought over what was left of the empire. And when the Angles arrived, they created a kingdom which was north of the Humber, so they called it Northumbria. And basically, the show tells the story of how Constantine accelerated acceptance of Christianity when he converted. He became the emperor in York, actually, in AD 306. And that, of course, brought Christianity into the Roman Empire. But as that faded, a new kind of religious empire was created. And but Northumbria actually had its own distinctive culture, which was there were two different traditions. There was the Celtic tradition, which was an ascetic kind of close to nature ethos, as exemplified by St. Cuthbert. And there was also the Roman tradition. Pope Gregory sent St. Paulinus, I think, to try and convert the sort of Anglo-Saxons to Christianity. And so there was this kind of rivalry between the two factions. And so the songs represent all these things. So I've got a song about St. Cuthbert, how he became a hermit on the Inner Farne Island. Then I've got a song actually about Cadman, who actually worked for St. Hilda. And she was actually a major figure in the early Christianity. She actually convened the first synod, I think, of the church. And also was this was very early involvement of women in the church. And so Cadman actually wrote a poem, because the words came to him in a dream, and I set that to music. And that was, as you say, it's ancient texts which don't really, there's no natural rhyme, but they're so kind of beautiful and poetic that it's quite a challenge to do that. So it's not like normal, rhymes. Although some of the songs are like that.
And are they all original compositions that you have written these pieces yourself?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ask him, it's like, so I suppose every musician or poet has their muse, and yours has been history, and in particular Yorkshire history. And just like, why has that been so important for you to sing about these ancient characters? They'll be familiar to a lot of our listeners, I'm sure, but they won't know that much about St. Cuthbert. Why has it been so important to sing about these characters?
Well, one thing, starting off with the shows about Captain Cook, it's sort of a little bit of a revisionist negative view of history. So I'm very into the idea of saying that we can be very proud of our history, and how I think it's fascinating the way we actually had this distinctive Celtic Christianity created, and how it's still. One of the things I look at actually is there is a Celtic cross in Gosforth in Cumbria, actually. And that's actually very interesting because it's actually got Norse imagery on it and a Celtic cross, and it shows the kind of the way early Christian missionaries were seeking to they were trying to persuade people to convert, and they tried to they said, well, okay, if you've got certain traditions, we can accommodate those, such as midwinter festivals and things like that. So there was sort of a bit of it was quite a distinctive thing, which seems to have been lost as well. I think it's important to point out things about history that people might forget in the modern world, because we had these with the religious establishment, shall we say, kind of smoothing things over a bit. I think that as we can see from these beautiful stained glass windows showing the life of St. Cuthbert, he's pretty central to it. That's a major song in the middle of it. But I've also got a song about the Venerable Bede. And then I discussed the arrival of the Vikings. And I think there is a bit of a glamorizing of the Vikings. In fact, a lot of people have Viking festivals, things like that.
This is one thing I was going to ask you in general about, because obviously the Vikings have quite a romanticised history in some way, but also the likes of your beads and St. Cuthbert's, there's quite a lot of mythology surrounding some of these ancient Celtic saints. And I'm just, does your music have some of that in it, some references to the mythology, or is it more like you're interested in the facts, what is going on here? Let's preserve our historical.
No, it is a sort of it is essentially, they are essentially songs which kind of somehow inspire. I remember the Solitude of St. Cuthbert has a lot of kind of space in it, musical space. It's kind of slow, atmospheric, with an unusual kind of structure to it, really. The kind of people who just, certain things, certain phrases kind of interest me. One was the old wine of ancient learning was one of Alcuin's phrases. And I thought, wow, I thought maybe I could call the album that, And I started having that as a repeated phrase, the old wine of ancient learning. He actually, the funny thing, when the Vikings did arrive, he actually was quite worried about it when they had that brutal attack on Lindisfarne. And he at the time was working for Charlemagne. So he was quite a big figure in the kind of religious establishment. He'd started off in York, and he wrote a letter to the Bishop of Lindisfarne saying he thought that it was retribution for sort of decadent behaviour. And he was saying, that you shouldn't be drunk and things like that. But then he said, it's okay to like the old wine of ancient learning, though. But but I mentioned the Vikings, Venerable Bede. These are kind of, as you say, kind of inspired with one of the things you were saying about this faith at the Fringe, where does art meet faith? And I think that we can see examples in the golden age of Northumbria with things like the Lindisfarne Gospels. That art was a very big feature. It was one of the ways they wanted to kind of establish a different kind of culture, because when they actually were creating some of the when Bede was creating the monastery, it was the first time anybody built a stone building for about 200 years after the Romans had left. So they were very keen to create a culture. And I think this is so distinctive. I thought that this was enough to kind of do a whole album on it. And but then with a couple of songs at the end, which were more kind of worship songs, following the same kind of theme. And, one of the things was, I remember reading, stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. And I thought this symbolizes looking at the ancient paths, looking at history, and how it's a good thing to. So relying on things that have been is maybe the message, rather than believing in everything in the modern world. So that's sort of the whole thing tends to put into music ancient text, really.
It sounds beautiful. Those the lines that you're just commenting there, have you incorporated them as lyrics into one of your songs?
Yeah, well, that's in The Good Way.
Now, how about we have a little listen to The Good Way? Can we do that? Because it would be lovely to hear some of your music as well.
Stand at the crossroads and look and ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your soul. It's good to praise the Lord and make music to his name.
So it's quite an astounding song that you've got there. And the lyric that you've just mentioned, is that your favourite part in that song? Or is there another bit that catches your attention that you would signpost us to?
Well, no, actually, the thing was, it's also about the fact that it's good to praise the Lord and make music to his name. So that, to me, seems that it could be any kind of music. It could be modern music. It needn't be, although I like a lot of church hymns. In fact, 19th century hymns were kind of like the pop music of the day. There were things where you would hear the opening chords and then you would immediately can join in, and it's congregational music. So that seemed to me to be very much that by doing music, you it's right to do that. And then another line is speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord.
Love that
Yeah.
line. Making
Ephesians.
melody to the Lord.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
love that line. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
It comes out, doesn't it?
I really like Ephesians. The poet is so beautiful and poetic. And there was another song that used a lot of that, but it went on. Another thing was the path of righteousness is like the morning sun, shining ever brighter till the full light of day. I then added, guide me towards a better way. But
So Tim, so in all these different ways, like it kind of, I think that encapsulates a lot about your music. The stand at the crossroads, the ancient ways that you're kind of pointing people towards, especially in maybe a generation and a culture where we're quite disconnected from our history. It sometimes feels like, and I love the way that your music is kind of reconnecting us with history. And I kind of wondered, how's that enriched your own faith and spirituality as you've kind of engaged with these amazing ancient figures and sang about them and incorporated the scriptures? How's that enriched your own faith and spirituality?
Well, it has definitely, and in fact, that started a little bit with the Wilberforce album because his faith enabled him to have the determination to carry out massive political change. And I remember doing some of those songs and feeling almost playing Wilberforce actually. And in fact, some of these songs, I'm playing St. Cuthbert, really reading his lines, and it kind of somehow you by doing that, you actually it revitalizes your own faith. And I've become a lot more interested in certainly doing that album. That inspired me to do the Northern Faith because of the doing that Wilberforce album. And now I can see more by reading some of these things. I sort of think, this is kind of so beautiful and poetic that it kind of is, it's inspirational. Yeah.
So you've mentioned St. Cuthbert, and The Solitude of St. Cuthbert is one of the songs in your show, and we're here in St. Cuthbert's Parish Church, and we're sitting beside these stained glass windows that depict his life story. So why don't we hear a little bit more about the song that you've written about St. Cuthbert? Maybe we could have a listen to that too, and then you can tell us a little bit more about the song specifically.
Yes, that'd be great.
Super. So this is The Solitude of St. Cuthbert.
If I could live in a tiny dwelling on a rock in the ocean, surrounded by the waves of the sea, and cut off from the sight and sound of everything else.
A real mix in that song of like almost the ethereal kind of sounds, those celestial sounds, and the synthesizer coming in, and it's just a real, almost quite a juxtaposition of musical styles that you've come in. And I wonder if that's actually quite purposeful. It's quite intentional because you are bringing together stories of the ancients, like St. Cuthbert's, right into our modern day homes and now. So is that an intention to bring these kind of two really different styles of music into that one song?
Yes. In fact, the first, it's got an unusual structure, really. It kind of starts off, it's sort of got a middle part, really. So really, the first part is the phrase where he says, "If I could live on a tiny dwelling on a rock in the ocean." So this is about where he wants to be cut off from everything because he's worried he might that somehow the love of money might still come and snatch me away. So he's kind of wanting this solitude. But that was a phrase that a quote from him. Now I made up the second bit, which was that he was tempted a lot on the island. So it was saying, "Deceiver, depart. You cannot change my heart. I don't want power and fame. I only seek to be closer to the Lord. So I throw down my sword and worship his name." And that's that he had been a military man for a while, and he decided to become a monk, really. So
it sounds quite
Yeah.
it sounds quite similar to something David might write in the Psalms, doesn't it? About
Definitely retreating to a cave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does. And I if we think back to that conversation that we were just having about how it enriches your faith, and just thinking about it on a little bit of a wider context as well. Obviously, you have your show here, and if you've not yet seen Northern Faith Show, if you've not yet seen Tim's show, you can still go. Tomorrow, Wednesday, it's on 3 till 4 at Arthur Conan Doyle Centre. We will post the details up in the description, but you can still go and hear it. And just thinking about it on a wider context, and thinking about the place of faith at the Fringe, and here you are, you're presenting music that's telling of this really rich history and hopefully opening up to a new audience. But that's my assumption. Is that what you're hoping to do with the show? Are you hoping to reach a new audience with it and open up the possibilities of faith through your music? Or are you hoping to do other things with it as well?
Well, it would be great if people were. It's like with the other two shows that hopefully, if some people have very often said, well, I never knew a lot of that. They learn a lot. They sort of say, we never knew about that. So hopefully this can inspire people. Hopefully they'll go to Lindisfarne and see how beautiful it is. And it might be. I know today's show there was some. Not everybody is from this country, so they're interested in our history. So yes, I would like to kind of inspire people to get involved with learning more about our heritage. And also the idea that, I think modern music can help more people go to church. I think there's one that's sort of, I'm not suggesting, I actually like a lot of traditional hymns and I like church organ music actually, but I think there's a case there are some modern hymns. It's a bit like In Christ Alone. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a beautiful song. And that is now in the, so one or two songs from the last 20 years are now going into the hymn book. And I think it'd be good to see more of that, and because I think some people might want to see some of the modern music that they hear every day, maybe reflected a bit. Why can't that become used in?
And certainly, in a sense, the flow of the songs. They start off with these historical pieces and characters, and then towards the end of the album, if you like, it kind of breaks into these worship songs. At least that's what I found anyway. You had almost like more worshipful songs towards the end that I could imagine singing in a church context in some senses. So do you write worship music as well?
Yes. In fact, that was the interesting thing. The show kind of ends by saying, it's really saying, I'm telling stories of people who, for whom day-to-day existence was very difficult, and the future of the church was hanging by a thread. They had to persevere to establish the church, and I think that if we look at that can inspire people in the modern world where there's so many competing things happening, where there's a modern generation who perhaps might expect to sort of be able to worship online or something like that. There's various. I think you've got to kind of get people more interested in the church through modern music. So I think, and actually art and music, this was what the Northern Saints did. They created this beauty of the Lindisfarne Gospels and things like that. And I think it was actually, being part of a monastery was quite an important job. A lot of people really respected it. People actually wanted to sort of be in. They did all kinds of things, from brewing beer and wine and things, having all these crafts and the beautiful kind of art. So I think we've got to kind of we need sort of new venerable beads and new St. Cuthberts to revitalise interest in the church.
That is a really interesting concept, actually, isn't it? Just taking those historical people of faith that have shaped society and then thinking, actually, we need them now. And in one sense, I suppose we need to look around and be perceptive as to who are the modern day St. Cuthberts, and who do we have as the venerable beads that are the nows, and make sure that we are shouting about them, giving them in the right way, in that sense of giving them platforms to make sure that they're able to share and encourage and inspire, and hopefully in hundreds of years to time to come, that people will be kind of saying, look how these people pointed to God, look how they shaped society in a faithful way, and maybe that's us. Maybe that's actually something that each of us carry to do, that there is a responsibility and a passion within us all. That sounds a bit sensible, doesn't it? And so that sounds a bit like God would give us a gift and part to do that.
Or like Tim said, that God would give us some new wine, perhaps as well.
Yeah,
some new wine. Well, I have to ask you this question, because I saw this on a podcast the other day. I heard this question asked. I was really keen to ask you as a songwriter, almost in that vein. Like, these were people who were inspired by God. The people who were sensitive to the Spirit, made such a difference, almost had a prophetic voice in history. And as a songwriter, and you've got all these melodies going around, do you feel like they're just given to you? You just wake up and you've got that song in your head. Have you ever had a song that you're like, I'm not sure if I wrote that or not? I think that was a gift or a present. Asking you in all humility, obviously.
Well, it was funny that the Good Way, it was just so kind of it came very quickly, that one. I must say, it was sort of somehow inspired by the words. So maybe I think one of the things is, actually, I think the good thing about doing this is, whereas a lot of people see religion and history, it's sort of looking back, but if you can put it into a new context, people can see that it can be brought to life now and be relevant to people now. Whereas I think that's one of the things. Presumably, some young people think that it's all a bit stuffy and old, and I think you can make this into you can point out by being inspired by the saints. Absolutely. To see they were bringing this alive.
I certainly think that's what your music does. It's as though it is taking the words on the pages of the history books and actually creating these 3D figures out of them, so you can get to relate to the person and understand them more and bring them to life in the way that you're talking about. But actually, it's not so, yes, it centers on the person, but it's much more about who their faith is in. And I love that comes through your music as well. And one of my takeaways, I have to say, from our conversation just now is just been that way that you are opening up not just history, but you're opening up faith through music. And that's been this gift that you have, whereby you can compose and you give out these sounds that pull people in to have a little bit more of a look about history and about faith. And I just think that's really special, and I'm really thankful that we've had this time to talk with you about it and explore it a little bit more. And Duncan, what if there's just one thing that you're taking away from our chat with Tim today? What is it? What would it be?
I think absolutely. It really resonates with me that you're looking back at the ancient ways that these amazing people are part of our heritage, you know, and there's a real freshness in that, and there's a real, I don't think we can properly walk forward unless we're really rooted in the past. And there's these beautiful, eternal ways that these people have walked in that we can walk in today, the eternal ways of God. And these guys can continue to inspire us. And I think you've done that. I think your music really inspires us to look at the past and to sing about it going forward in our day as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining myself and Duncan and Tim this evening. I hope you've had a good time as we've been listening and talking through about music and Northern Faith and what Tim is doing with it. And if you are inspired to go and see a show, as I think we all are, I'm just kind of that, this is good music. It's good food for us to go and hear and engage with and think about. Then have a wee look at our description underneath and you'll see the links to take you to Tim's website and also his show while he's still here in Edinburgh. And in the meantime, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Faith at the Fringe. Thank you.